All right, y'all, welcome back to Remap Your Mind. It's time to create a life you design, and I am so excited. I get to have another one of my new fast friends,
Mhm.
and I would say a colleague. This young man here. He is the owner and founder of Hope LLC, and he is doing some amazing work as a therapist and out in the community around intergenerational trauma. I want to welcome to the show Jared Washington. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Thank you for the amazing introduction. It's always interesting to hear, how other people view the work that I'm doing. So when I hear it, it's like, wow, I actually am
Yeah.
doing some good work.
It is a thing, isn't it, when you hear other people sort of like reflect who you are.
hmm
But I've been following you for a while. You know that we've had a few conversations, previous to this, and I've been watching the work that you're doing. I'm so excited for you to talk about the book during this episode. But it's just, I think what's refreshing is to see Black male therapists, Black
Absolutely.
men who are tackling mental health, who are destigmatizing it, who are normalizing it in a way and making it safe for Black people in general, but especially for Black men to talk about these things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would definitely agree. We need these safe spaces for Black men as well as Black women to be vulnerable and talk about past hurts, past traumas, life transitions, stress management, everything. So
Mhm.
I think this work is extremely important, and I'm just glad to be able to do it and be a part of it, and just assist our community in its healing process. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I always like to start by having the audience get to know you a little bit more. So tell us about yourself. Tell us, just a little bit how you came to be. Just give us a little inside look at Mr. Washington.
So I'm originally from New Jersey. I'm a licensed professional counselor, fully licensed in the state of Georgia. I'm based out of Atlanta. So, and like I said, I'm originally from New Jersey. Moved to Atlanta about 10 years ago, back in 2011, September 11th, 2011, the day that I drove with all my stuff and moved
Wow.
to Atlanta, me and my dad. But yeah, I'm the CEO and founder of Hope, which stands for Healing, Outreach, Purpose, and Empowerment. I work in
Mhm.
private practice, and what kind of got me into this field is I was thinking about being a teacher. That didn't work out, and I was already working in mental health and applied for some jobs at a psych hospital. Ended up in Atlanta. Loved the work that I was doing, and I just wanted to see how that I could move, move the needle. And I was always passionate about Black people. That's one thing I should definitely share. I was always passionate about Black people, and going into mental health really helped me be able to merge the two, mental health
Yeah.
and in the Black community.
Yeah.
And that's how I stumbled upon intergenerational trauma,
Mm.
where again, just so fascinated, so engulfed in the Black experience in America, and
Yeah.
how our experience and with slavery and
Hmm.
how we interact and engage today. And I took a class on trauma, and that came up, and I was just instantly fell in love with it, and it was like,
Yeah.
how can I be a part of this? How can I work with this, change this? And so that's just pretty much how I ended up here, and I got the credentials to fall behind my name to really do the work, or at
Yeah.
least be credible to do the work in certain
Yeah.
people's eyes. And and then I wrote a book.
Hey, that it's like the natural progression, right? You
Yeah,
get credentials, you do the work in the community, and then you're like, okay, time for a book. And you
yeah.
do a lot of speaking in the community as well. You're very active on social media, a lot of interviews. I think that sometimes when we're in the trenches doing the work, we don't realize how impactful we're being,
Yeah.
the ripples that we're creating, and who's watching,
Mhm.
way back in the day when I was still practicing clinical medicine, I wrote this book called Eat Your Disease Away.
Mhm.
I've always been really passionate about your food being your medicine, right? Like
Mhm.
these natural things. And I was talking to my dad, who is in Rhode Island, by the way, and he's a retired OBGYN. And apparently someone a resident he was working with picked up my book and was like, "Are you related to Dr. Maiysha Clairborne?" Like, really? And he was like, "Oh my gosh, I thought my daughter was a star." And I was like, "Well, I wouldn't say all that." But I mean, you just never know how far your reach is, and especially with technology and social media. So you never know the impact that you're having by speaking out and by doing the work that you're doing, and who's whispering your name and saying such and such helped me.
Yeah.
Jared helped me with this. You should check this brother out. Like that, right?
Yep.
So it's amazing to hear those little things every now and then from
Mhm.
people far and wide.
Yeah,
You're doing good
absolutely.
work. Yeah. So this whole thing around intergenerational trauma also fascinates me. The work I do with the unconscious mind. It I was talking to this doc yesterday, and she put this this sort of idea that everyone's baseline is from trauma. Like you
Mhm.
we all have experienced trauma. Everybody has
Mhm.
experienced trauma. So like that's the baseline from which we operate and interact with people.
Yep.
So then, I was sharing with her, well, that begs to the question, if that's the case, then where does this trauma come from? Like
Mhm.
we're not born as babies like, well, I'm traumatized. It's you know, has to be passed down. We
Mhm.
inherit conversations, ancestrally.
Mhm.
And so, you know, tell me, I like the idea, I like the idea that if we understand and we recognize that that's our baseline, then we have something to work with, right?
Mhm.
What is sort of your take on that?
I think the awareness piece is so important,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because and I think that's the biggest thing for me is that I want to get this knowledge or this information out so that people know that it exists, right? When you're talking about trauma, or even when you think about, some people say, well, slavery happened 100, 200 years, well, it really wasn't 200, but
Mm-hmm.
150 years ago. Why are you still talking about that? And it's
Mm-hmm.
if you understand this concept of intergenerational trauma, then that means you understand that inherently it's passed down through different generations. And so
Mm-hmm.
for us to understand why we may interact the way we interact, or why we may be in certain positions that we're in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and stuff like that, why we may think the way we think
Mm-hmm.
or believe some of the things that we believe in is based out of trauma and is
Yeah.
based out of our experiences that our ancestors went through
Mm-hmm.
and how that literally um, encoded in our epigenetics and was passed down. I always give the most basic example when it comes to the epigenetics piece is that, and when I say the most basic example also because I'm not a science guy, and the most basic example I can give that I feel like makes the most sense for me and probably would make the most sense to your lay person is just think about I learned that when a woman is pregnant and if she experiences depression, that while the baby is in the womb, the chances of that baby experiencing depression in their life goes up exponentially. you know and
Mm-hmm.
so that's just an example of just imagine your family and experiencing poverty that
Right.
that stems from systematic oppression, right?
Yeah.
That stems
Right.
from chattel slavery, the ideology of from that came out of chattel slavery. you
Right.
know just that's another example of how that is encoded in our epigenetics.
Yes,
You,
absolutely.
you know, so
Gosh.
yeah, so I just think that awareness piece to just know that this does exist is
Hmm.
it's it's backed by data. It's
Yeah.
backed with research and
Hmm.
and even science. And so,
Yeah.
just that awareness piece so that we can start to make, start the healing process, and so that trauma doesn't really necessarily have to be our baseline.
That's right. That's right. And I think that, sometimes we don't even realize the depths to which it impacts us. Every area of our life, right? We could talk about, and we will talk about in a different conversation, because boy, we can get down on some conversation now. Y'all, the first time I talked to this brother, the very first time, like we were introducing each other, was an hour on the phone, because we were getting deep. I'm a nerd about this stuff. We geeked out real fast on intergenerational trauma. So we could really get into like intergenerational poverty mindset,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
or intergenerational poverty, period,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like not just poverty mindset. I mean, that's like a part of it, right? But then there's like the actual thing that happens as a result of the poverty mindset that's intergenerationally passed down.
Exactly.
And we also can get into, parenting, and like how we pass stuff down to our children, conversations. What I'm really fascinated about, and I really want to have this conversation, is about how it impacts relationship between Black men and women,
Mm,
whether it's intimate partner, whether it's job related, whether it's brother or sister, father daughter. Like these are all of these are very important relationships between Black men and Black women.
mhm.
And if you can imagine, I mean, I know but like if y'all can imagine, um, just the conversation around slavery and how things were handled, and the man's taken out of the home to be in the field, and the woman, she's either in the field or in the house, and then the way the women were raped and messed around, like all of that, right? The
Mhm,
children taken out of the home early to be put.
mhm.
So like, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the trauma and how that has impacted us today, how it still impacts us today.
Yeah. Even, just to reiterate what you said,
Hmm.
you have to start with the dynamics of slavery, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
how like you said, the man was taken out, or and babies being snatched away from their mothers, and
Hmm.
you know men have maybe having to not maybe men having to watch their wives, if they were even allowed to be married, watch their wives be raped, or even just
Hmm.
knowing their wives are going to be raped,
Right.
um or sexually assaulted in some type of way,
Hmm.
watching Black men being pretty much not only brutalized but broken in front of in front of Black women, and
Right.
not
Yes.
pretty much creating the dynamic that no matter what, the Black man cannot protect you, right?
Hmm.
And no one can protect you, which I think even brings about, and I know you talked about this before, it brings about because of the resiliency of Black women, it brings about this. And I won't talk too much about this because I'm not a Black woman and I don't walk in the shoes of a Black woman, right?
Hmm.
But it
Hmm.
brings up this, that resiliency brings up the topic of like the idea, concept of the strong Black woman, right?
Hmm.
And so then
Hmm.
you have that dynamic mixed with the dynamic of the Black man, who is, supposed to be based off of patriarchy, right?
Right.
Supposed to be the protector, the provider, and yada yada so forth, right?
Hmm.
And you have both of those concepts or both of those dynamics, and they clash,
Right.
right? They clash.
Right.
And so
Absolutely.
that you have that, so you have to talk about the dynamics of chattel slavery to talk about the relationship between the Black
Hmm.
man and Black woman. On Instagram, I see Black men and Black women going back and forth about, about relationship stuff
Mhm.
all the time.
Yeah.
Saying black men don't protect black women, and you have black men, operating in, not all, but you have, a good number of black men operating, under toxic masculinity
Yeah.
because of, you know, um, patriarchy,
Right.
right?
Right.
And
Which is a
so
white supremacy culture's dynamic, right?
exactly.
Yep.
So when you're talking about, because to an extent, us as black people, we even uphold white supremacy,
Absolutely.
right? And
Hmm.
so with that being said, even if we uphold the walls of white supremacy, which comes with misogyny, which comes with
Hmm.
masculinity, which comes with patriarchy and things of that
Hmm.
nature. That creates the friction between, the relationship between black men and black women, right? I
Hmm.
was on a podcast one time, and not a podcast. I was doing an Instagram or Facebook Live, something like that, and
Hmm.
I mentioned how, one of the listeners, it was a black woman, and she mentioned how black men get off by abusing black women, right? And it was interesting, and I was like, I believe that the confidence and self-esteem of black men is built off the backs of black women,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
so, that's really tough to say, being a black man, right?
Yeah, that's
And
really
also,
interesting.
yeah, right. And so, so when you talk about the intergenerational trauma piece, you got to talk about also the parenting practices, the
Yeah.
parenting, like what are we teaching our children,
Hmm.
right? What are we teaching our daughters about, when as it comes to relationships,
Hmm.
um, what are we teaching our sons as it relates to relationships, right?
Hmm.
Are we teaching our sons to, um, treat black women how they're supposed to be treated,
Hmm.
like, treating them good, treating them well, not how
Yeah.
society says black women should be treated, because that's a
Right.
different story, right? Society
Hmm.
society treats black women probably the worst, right? And so,
Hmm.
are we teaching our sons to, our young black boys to, you know, care for and treat black women, you know, well and good?
Right.
Just to, I was trying to look
Right.
for a big word, but whatever, we'll use
We don't
well.
need to look for big. Look, we don't need to look for big words, child.
Are we teaching our, like, what are we teaching our daughters, and,
Yeah.
and stuff like that, so it's 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 a touchy and hard topic to talk about, but we must talk about it. And that's how
Have to.
intergenerational trauma fits in there, because I talked about how the trauma is passed down, through epigenetics, but it's also passed down through storytelling. It's
Right.
also passed down through learned behaviors. Did I
Right.
see my father beat on my mother?
Yeah.
Right? Did I see
Hmm.
did I see my mother, um degrade or emasculate, my father? Right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And when I use the term emasculate very loosely, because you got a lot of hoteps that use emasculate in different ways, in very toxic way. So I'm using it very loosely.
Yeah.
But you know um but yeah, like, what did I see growing up?
Yeah.
Was there even a father in my home? Have I seen a successful marriage?
Child.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yes.
you
And
know
the interesting thing about it, when you say, your experience, I keep finding this to be, and this is why this is so important to have these conversations, because there is a particular age difference between you and me. Right. There is a particular, um and so, um when you speak of these various experiences, and I don't know how much of the experience is personal. I grew up in a home where I watched my mom be abused,
Mhm,
by my stepfather,
mhm,
right? But also, I watched some really interesting dynamics between my mom and my dad later on,
mhm,
you know, having been divorced.
Yeah.
And I watched my mom be very what's the word, aggressive with the man she married after my stepfather who abused her, right?
Hmm.
And it's interesting. It's like, oh, these are such common experiences, but we don't realize how common they are in our community because we
Hmm.
don't talk about it. We
Yep.
don't talk about it. It's like that whole what goes on in the house stays in the house kind of
Hmm.
thing. There's a lot of shame around it.
Hmm.
And I think that's the piece, that's where the healing has to come in, is to begin to know that we're not alone in these experiences. And then like look at, okay, well, where does this come from? What
Yep.
did we inherit?
Hmm.
Like I am so committed is the word I want to use, to breaking that cycle between myself and my son. Like the dynamic that me and my mom had, and the dynamic that me and my son will have, or
Yeah.
are having, right?
Yeah.
And when you say, have I ever seen a successful marriage? you know I look, there are maybe a couple in my community that I can think of, but up close and personal,
Hmm.
not really. So
Yeah.
this thing that you're talking about, it's just so it's so real,
Yeah.
and we have to acknowledge it so that we can begin to shift it. Now, there's something you said that I cannot step over. It just struck me, because I think there's a really fine line, and that was when you said that the confidence and self-esteem of Black men is built on the backs of Black women.
Hmm.
And I never really thought about that. But what I think is tricky about it is that when you say that, and you really look, I can see some I can see some truth around that. And at the same time, and so that can put some pressure, like, on Black women. But at the same time, I do believe it's important that we as Black women support and uplift
Hmm.
Black men. So it's not this, like, there's this fine line, like, you know, it's not like it should fall on us, but at the same time, we can be responsible for being a contributor to continuing to uplift our men,
Yeah. I
right?
know. And so, in the angle or perspective I'm coming from with that is when we talk about how Black men, what's the word I'm looking for? How Black men use Black women,
Mm,
right? And so,
mhm.
yeah, I agree. Black women, as well as, we should support each other, right?
Exactly.
Uplift each other,
That's
right?
right.
And so, instead of, and you think about, and I hate to bring this part up, but because I listen to it as well. But when you
Mhm.
think about, the music in our community, and we
Mm,
talk about
mhm.
rap and hip hop, and how it
Right.
talks about how it pretty much displays how Black men use Black women, right? And of course, use
Mhm.
other things, right? But
Right, of
but
course.
one of the dynamics is how Black men use Black women, right?
Mhm.
And so, from a sexual standpoint, and that's what the
Mhm.
part that's the angle I'm coming from. Ourselves, how
Ah.
many you're popular if you with your popularity is determined with how many women you can have sex with,
Mhm.
right? And so
Mhm.
that's where I'm the man because I'm able to have sex with multiple women
Mhm.
at the same time.
Mhm.
I manipulate,
Mm. Mhm. Mhm.
right? And so
Mhm.
so when I say our self-esteem can be, and again, this is a general statement. There's
Yeah.
anomalies and all, or exceptions in all generalizations, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so what I mean by that is, Black men's self-esteem, our self-identity,
Right.
right, can be um created, or um I don't want to use the word uplifted, but increased
Mhm.
based off of how we use and even abuse Black women.
Mm. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah,
That's woo, that's deep, man.
yeah.
It's deep to think about.
And
And
a lot
and
of
that's
and
mhm.
a lot of and a lot of men will probably hate me for saying that. But that's
But you
cool.
know what? Men who, and I think this is really great, because what there's the whole me think thou dost protest too much.
Mhm.
So for the people who are resisting this conversation, I invite them to really then, resist and then take a look.
Yeah.
Like try it on,
Yeah.
because people only resist when they're convicted. When they're convicted, I don't do that. I don't do that. But when you think about like the shadow work,
Mhm.
right? Whatever you're resisting, whatever you have an extreme reaction to, you got to take a look at whether that's part of the shadow. Like,
Yeah.
have you ever done it?
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
and all the ways, so I think that it's important to have these conversations that are uncomfortable for people to hear,
Mhm.
because then there might be men to be like, right?
Mhm.
And then there'll be men to be like, oh man, oh
Mhm.
snap, that's, I need to take a look,
Yeah.
right? And then there'll be women who listen and be like, oh wow, is that what's happening? Like there's a voice that's been given to something. It's almost like when I do my anti-racism training, and there are BIPOC people in the room, specifically Black executives in the room, and we talk about the symptoms, the characteristics of white supremacy, and the Black people are listening. They're like, oh, that's what that's called,
Mhm.
right? Oh, that's what it's called. Oh, paternalism. That's what that looks like in real life. Oh,
Mhm.
worship of the written word. Oh, yeah. Oh, I can't. Oh, there's only one right way. Oh, okay. That's what that looks like in the world. That's what I've been experiencing all this time, you
Yeah.
know? So like I think what you're saying, you're, number one, you're pulling out some weeds that need to be pulled, right? And second of all, you might be giving voice to some women, to some things that women have experienced that are like, oh, this is what is going on, you know? So yeah, that's a pretty deep dynamic. And so um I guess the question is, and I think, and there's something else that was said. I think you said it, or I said, I think we both said it at one point, which is all of this is this is all happening inside of a culture of white supremacy, inside of a system is that is built, that was built some hundreds of years ago, that decided that white white people are superior to Black people. And then there are all of the conversations and all of the ways that we've been treated inside of that system that now have us, like you said, uphold some of
Mhm.
the characteristics, or we have internalized a lot of these characteristics and symptoms, and then that gets passed down as well
Mhm.
inside of the epigenetics. So then the question becomes, how do then we I like the way some people say decolonize,
Mhm.
our mindset. How do we be, because clearly the system is going to be very slow to change, very, very slow. I believe it can change
Yeah.
based on all of the things, all of the movement that's happening, but it's going to be real slow.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So then how do we exist in the culture without necessarily having to be dragged along by it, in the context of relationships, specifically between Black men and Black women?
That is a great question, right? And
Hmm.
I'm not even sure I have a full on answer for it. I think we need to, as Black men and Black women, we need to have more conversation. We need to communicate, right?
Hmm.
We need to heal, right?
Hmm.
We need to, you know, I don't want to say become healthy or become whole, because when I think about healing, I don't think of it as a destination. I look at it as a journey, a process.
Hmm.
Life is forever moving,
Yep.
we're forever evolving, and we're forever
Yep.
going through life and
Yep.
experiencing, right? So if we can start healing
Hmm.
from our traumas,
Hmm.
um, start communicating
Hmm.
with each other,
Right.
um, and listen to each other, right? Because
Yes.
the thing is that we're arguing, but I'm not
Hmm.
listening to you and you're not listening to
Mm.
me. I'm just trying to get my point across because I feel like I'm right, which goes back to white
Right.
supremacy, right? Where
Right. Right.
there's only one way. My way is right, your way is wrong. But
Hmm.
Why? And that goes to the either or concept. And I
Yes,
always, even with my clients, I always ask, like, why does it have to be either or? Why can't it be a
that's
duality?
that's right.
Why
That's
can't
right.
your truth be right and also my truth?
Hmm.
And how can we coexist? How can we how can we coexist?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so I think that's the start. It
Hmm.
starts within healing ourselves, so
Yeah.
that when we are engaging in those conversations with each other, when black
Hmm.
men and black women are engaging with each other, we're coming from a space of healing rather than a space of trauma.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because basically what's happening is trauma speaking to trauma, not person speaking to person,
Exactly.
you know. And one thing I have to say is we have got to, as Black people, become responsible for doing our deep work,
Hmm.
right? Like, I think that's a thing we avoid.
Yeah.
I can see we're turning a corner as a culture, right? But there's so many conversations, and it could be from the distrust of, of systems, systems of healing that were not built for us. But
Hmm.
now there are so many more, Black therapists, Black healers, self-help, just all kinds of people like you and me who do this work with people. And I think it's so important that we have to now start to be responsible for our healing and seek it out wherever we need to seek it out and do it within ourselves as well,
Hmm.
right? And I think that's the start. It's the awareness, the acceptance, the action of really, going into ourselves so that we can listen differently,
Hmm.
right? So that we can listen, period,
Yep.
and be willing to sort of uh, to 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 quell down our egos for the moment to be able to hear what the other person is saying and step into their shoes for just a moment. You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh my God! I just looked at the time. I was like, "What? This conversation went so fast." But you know what? It's not the it's the first, but not the last. We got so much more to talk about.
Absolutely.
Oh
Absolutely.
my gosh. Well, I want to make sure that people know where they can find you. So if you can just, tell people how they can follow you on Facebook, on Instagram, all your social media platforms. If you have a website, if you have an offering, please let them know how they can be with you.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. Instagram is J dot Washington dot Hope.
Hmm.
You can find me there. My website is www.jwhopeservices.com. And I'll even give my email. Email address is jaredlpc@jwhope.com. So those are all
Awesome.
ways that you can reach me. All ways that you can follow me on Instagram, get information about the book. Um,
Hmm.
and I'll do a quick little plug about the book.
Please,
The name of
please.
the book is Heal or Repeat, Breaking the
Mm,
Cycle of Intergenerational Trauma.
mm.
And it comes out pre-orders will be July 16th, which will honor Asada Shakur's birthday, and the
Mhm.
official release will be um, August 17th, which will honor Marcus Garvey's birthday. So
Yes, yes, yes. I cannot wait to read that book. I am so excited for you and for the community who will have access to it. That's going to be just amazing. Well, I just want to thank you for this conversation. Like I said, the first but not the last,
absolutely.
and I'm really, really looking forward to just this release and then continuing the conversation thereafter.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having
Yes,
me. And I definitely,
absolutely.
as always, enjoy our conversations.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And we will have all of the information that you've said in the show notes. So you guys, please check out Jared Washington. Follow him on social media. Look for the show notes, whether you're listening on the podcast or whether you're viewing the video podcast version, you will have access to these notes. So you'll be able to reach out, follow him. If you want to get some more deep work done, then you can reach out to him directly. And of course, we want to thank the listeners because without the listeners, there is no podcast. And
Mhm.
so if you like what you hear and see, please share it because, there are people out there who need to hear this message. And if you don't like it, share it anyway because somebody will like it. Okay. And
Yep.
so, and then of course, please just leave your comments, leave a review, let us know, and let the people who are listening after you know that this show can transform lives. So thank you again, Jared. We look forward to the next conversation. And you guys have a great rest of the day and a great rest of the week. Namaste, y'all.